Okay, so today we're going to take a field trip to the open ocean. I promise, it's really cool. However, before we can begin this super cool open ocean excursion, we need to learn a little bit about the open ocean biome. The open ocean is a single interconnected body of water which covers approximately 71% of the Earth's surface. Though it's the largest of the biomes in terms of its expansion across the Earth, it's the least explored due to its extreme depths. 64% of the open ocean is considered the high seas, typically known for their rough waters. Another name for the open ocean is the pelagic zone. The pelagic zone is known for having the greatest volume and the greatest vertical range of any life zone on Earth. Several abiotic characteristics of the open ocean that help determine the life present in the biome include temperature, pH, rainfall, and how much heat is absorbed. The average temperature of the open ocean is 39 degrees Fahrenheit. The average pH is 8.2, but this number is slowly decreasing due to the acidification of the ocean. The average rainfall per year is 398,000 cubic kilometers of rain, and this is 78% of the Earth's rain. The surface layer of the ocean absorbs over half of the heat reaching the Earth from the sun. Another abiotic characteristic that is unique to the open ocean is the flow from the thermohaline currents. These are driven by temperature and salinity differences. The surface currents determine the temperature of the surrounding area. This can be shown by the Gulf Stream current, which carries warm waters to Europe. Europe is warmer than other continents at the same latitude due to the warm Gulf Stream current that flows into it. The open ocean covers latitudes from 90 degrees south to 90 degrees north. Whoa, isn't that crazy? That's all 7 continents! The soil conditions and characteristics in this particular biome are not incredibly important to determining the types of life that are present here. However, sand and mud form the sediment of the ocean floor. The ocean can be divided into 4 major zones longitudinally: the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian, and the Arctic. Of those 4 zones, the Atlantic and the Pacific can both be divided further into north and south. The Pacific is the largest of the oceans, covering about 46% of the planet's waters. Also, it's the deepest, containing Marianas Trench, which records Challenger Deep to be 11 kilometers, or 6.83 miles. The Indian Ocean is the warmest, with waters measured at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, the Arctic being the coldest, sometimes reaching 7 degrees, and the Atlantic is the youngest of all the oceans. Further zonation that occurs is the division into the epipelagic, mesopelagic, bathopelagic, abyssopelagic, and hedopelagic zones, which are determined by depth. This can be remembered by every mermaid braids an enemy's hair. These 5 zones can be further simplified into the photic zone, the aphotic zone, and the benthic zone. The photic zone contains 90% of marine life and is where sunlight is present and where photosynthesis takes place. The aphotic zone is where approximately 2% of marine organisms live and where sunlight is not present. And the benthic zone is where the ocean floor is. So any organism that is a bottom dweller lives there. Abiotic limiting factors to life include sunlight, temperature changes, which decrease with increasing depth, increasing pressure with increasing depth, and salinity. Salinity is the highest at the poles because as water turns into ice, the salt is left in the water. Therefore, the poles have the saltiest water. The open ocean contains 3 main primary producers: phytoplankton, algae, and tube worms. Both phytoplankton and algae live in the photic zone, where photosynthesis can take place. This is how they obtain their energy. Zooplankton are often confused as primary producers in the photic zone, but in reality, they're the ones who are the primary consumers who eat the phytoplankton. Tube worms live in the benthic zone and use chemosynthesis in order to obtain energy. The main consumers in this biome include killer whales, barracudas, white sharks, and anglerfish. Common predator and prey relationships in this biome include sharks eating dolphins, tuna eating small fish such as anchovies or sardines, and zooplankton eating the phytoplankton. Plant life in the open ocean is very scarce, so those which do exist in this biome need to have certain adaptations in order to survive with the limited sunlight. Seaweed is one of the few plants that can grow in this biome, and they're only able to grow in areas of the open ocean that receive sunlight because they need to photosynthesize in order to survive. Algae is well adapted to this biome because they contain air bladders and holdfasts. The air bladders, otherwise known as swim bladders, are filled air structures that maintain the buoyancy of the plants. These are also present in animals sometimes. Zooplankton use these swim bladders in order to go to the surface at night in order to feed. Also, these can aid with respiration. Another adaptation that algae has in order to be well suited to its environment is that they have 3 layers of their cell wall in order to protect them from the extreme pressures of the open ocean and from injury. Kelp is another plant that can live in such extreme conditions as the open ocean provides, and in order to be well suited to this environment, they contain stipes, floats, fronds, and blades, and similar to algae, holdfasts in order to connect them to the substrate. The stipe is the stem which is connected to the substrate by a holdfast. The floats are gas-filled chambers, much like air bladders, that help the blades reach sunlight. The fronds are leaves which are strong enough to hold the amount of water in order to protect the kelp from drying out. The blade is in charge of catching the sunlight for photosynthesis. Oftentimes, animals that live outside of the photic zone contain bioluminescence in order to attract prey. Bioluminescence is where there are photophores on the ventral side of the organism in order to attract prey. This is done through a method called counterillumination, where the bottom of the organism lights up in order to lure the food, and the dark colors such as black, red, or transparency are the colors on the top. Other adaptations of animals in this biome include swim bladders or the absence of them, depending on whether or not they're a migratory species, weaker strong bones, flabbier strong muscles, or large or small eyes, also depending on their depth or whether or not they're a migratory species, and usually large mouths and large teeth. Also, many species in the open ocean are hermaphrodites because in such a vast biome, it's hard to come across other members of the same species, especially if you need it to be a member of the opposite gender, and so hermaphrodites contain both male and female gametes. An example of this is an anglerfish. One way that human activities are altering or impacting this biome is caused by poor and careless methods of discarding trash, such as tires, water bottles, plastic bags, etc. These careless methods of dumping our trash have led to garbage islands, which now float throughout the Pacific and other oceans. Garbage islands are harmfully impacting the ocean biome because they block sunlight in the epipelagic zone, preventing photosynthesis from taking place, and they create unsafe conditions for animals such as whales, dolphins, and otters, all of whom come to the surface in order to breathe. A solution is to spread awareness of these garbage islands, to create more easily accessible and more productive landfills, and to eventually ban the use of plastic water bottles, which St. Stephen's has already done. Another way that humans have slowly changed this environment is by increasing the acidification of it. This is caused by an overabundance of greenhouse gases, which produce more runoff and eventually lead to climate change. The greenhouse gases which have increased in the atmosphere over time include carbon dioxide, which forms into carbonic acid, methane, nitric oxide, and tropospheric ozone, which is too bad. The increased acidification affects many organisms because they cannot handle the changes in pressure, temperature, and salinity that they used to be able to endure. This is because their membranes are thinning due to the more intense acid which they now live in. The main solution would be to reduce the greenhouse gas emission across the world. This was attempted through the Kyoto Protocol, and it worked a little bit, and now we just need to continue the effort. Now, personally, I think that the super cool open ocean excursion would be a lot less fun if there were garbage islands and acidic waters floating all around us. Anyway, now on to the endangered species of the open ocean biome. The Atlantic bluefish tuna, whose scientific name is Thenus thinus, lives off of the Spanish coast and off of Canada in the open ocean and can venture down the Brazilian coast. The Atlantic bluefish tuna is a pelagic oceanodromous species, which means that they can tolerate wide ranges of temperatures and salinity. They prey on small schools of fish such as anchovies, sauries, and hakes, along with crustaceans such as squids and crabs, and are also known to spawn in the Gulf of Mexico. On average, they live to 32 years old. They were listed as an endangered species in 1996, and after their reevaluation in 2011, they're still endangered. Part of the reason why this species is so vulnerable is because they swim in schools, so when one is caught, many others are likely to follow. Also, a characteristic that makes them more vulnerable to extinction is the fact that they taste really good. The threats which are currently causing their extinction mostly include oil spills, them swimming into and getting trapped in long lines and traps, the general overfishing of Atlantic bluefin tuna, and the lack of limits that Japanese sashimi markets put on their capture. The number remaining right now is estimated to be anywhere from 15,000 to 39,000. This number has declined 51% over the past 39 years. The current recovery efforts for bluefin tuna include increasing the minimum size of the fish which are allowed to be caught and by fixing tighter quotas. So far, these efforts have helped very minimally. In 1947, the International Commission for the Conservation of Atlantic Tuna was passed, but since then, the law's influence has helped less and less. Blue whales are another species that are endangered in the open ocean biome. They are known to eat krill almost exclusively and live in pods, migrating around the world in order to breed. The only place which they are not found is the Arctic Ocean. They were first listed as endangered in 1986 and were reevaluated in 2008, still being found to be endangered. Several characteristics which make them more vulnerable to extinction include their size and their baleen. Their baleen is sometimes sold when they're killed, and it's often what's mistaken for teeth. Is used to filter feed with the plankton. Their size is sometimes a disadvantage to them because they are more prone to being hit with large ships. Currently, the major cause of this species' endangerment has been commercial whaling and the direct exploitation of blue whales. This act has decreased their populations by about 80%. The number of blue whales remaining currently ranges from 10,000 to 25,000. Recovery efforts include the reduction of commercial whaling, and so far, this effort has worked because the population is slowly recovering. The ICW granted protection to whales in 1966. They set catch limits at 0 in 1986 in most countries. All countries but the Russian Federation, Norway, and Iceland participated in this effort to reduce whaling. Blue whales are also protected by the International Moratorium on Whaling, which prohibits all whaling in international waters. The moratorium was ratified in 1986, but is hard to enforce because it's in international waters. Well, now that we know all about the open ocean biome, I hope you're ready to go on this super cool open ocean excursion.